But first, you should have received the minutes for February 11th, 13th, 14th, 17th, and 25th. Any Representative Syward? Second. Seconded by Mosier. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval of these minutes, signify by saying aye. Aye. Post same sign. Minutes are approved. We will now have final action on SB 36, and call on Kyle Hamilton for a quick brief again. Yes. Microphone, so everybody knows.
Wanted to introduce that on both sides of the horseshoe, Representative Roth brought beef or deer jerky, and I brought deer sticks. So they're trying to send them around so you can get some. So help yourself.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, both kinds.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the deer hunting permits.
All right. Kyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 36 would amend the state funding requirements for conservation districts in the following ways. The deadline for districts to submit certification of county funding would be changed from September 1st to November 1st of each calendar year. The current $25,000 per district appropriation limit would be increased to an amount not to exceed $50,000 per district, and any such state appropriations would now be dispersed to each district on a 2-to-1 state-county matching basis, again, subject to appropriations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any first going off, Heather? Just to remind us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. According to the fiscal note, the Department of Agriculture estimates enactment of the bill could increase state aid to conservation districts. The Department of Agriculture indicates the FY 2025 appropriation from the State Water Plan Fund totaling $3.5 million provided an average of $33,359 per disbursement to each district. These disbursements to conservation districts occurred on July 10th, 2024, at the beginning of FY 2025. For 2026, the governor recommends a $4.3 million appropriation from the State Water Plan Fund and a $1 million transfer from the 2302 Projects Fund in the Kansas Water Office for state aid to conservation districts. The KDA notes that the appropriation and transfer could increase state aid to conservation districts in FY 2026. However, any state aid to conservation districts would be subject to the legislative approved appropriation and the matching county commission's allocations to conservation districts.
All right, thank you. Any questions for either one? Representative Syward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the cap of the $25,000, is that a cap per conservation district or cap per person in the conservation district applying for conservation help?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the $25,000 limit is being increased to $50,000, and that is per district as a whole.
Total per conservation district?
That's how I read the bill, yes.
Okay, just was curious because, okay.
This bill is not necessarily for conservation programs. Representative Blex, help me on this. This is money to go back to the districts, again, to help the district managers to keep them their wages and staff that the county is responsible. Is that correct, Representative Blex?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Basically, historically, the county's commissioners will meet and they will decide what they want to give the conservation district, kind of depending on available funds. I think at sometimes some counties, poor counties, that was down $15,000 or $16,000 annually, and then the state would match what the county commissioners gave up to $25,000. So if a county, for example, like Montgomery, my home county, the commissioners would always put up at least $25,000. And so the state would match $25,000. That puts $50,000 for paying a salary. In those 6 years that I was county chair, we went through three district managers, one about every 2 years, and the salary, we could just barely break even. The office expense, and even though a lot of the offices was provided by the NRCS, it was still a break even. We didn't have anything. That also went to a little bit of cost share programs. that we cost shared on the county. So what this will do will double the state responsibility. They can go up to $50,000. Now, if the county decides, well, the state's giving us $50,000, then we're going to kind of renege on our part, then that won't be allowed to happen. So it'll be taking the money. Some counties give a lot more than the 25, 30,000. So this will be a way that they can actually pay their help some living wages and long-term retention for some of their employees.
Okay. Any other questions right quick? If not, Representative Neely.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. I move that we pass SB 36, favorable for passage.
Seconded by Roth. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. SB 36 is approved. Representative Rozier, would you carry this bill? Sorry, I got you in.
It's not a banking bill.
Yeah, I know it's not. Yeah, it's all right. Thank you. Now, Senate Bill 89 for final action. Kyle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 89 would authorize the Animal Health Commissioner to adopt rules and regulations to administer the Poultry Disease Control Act and to establish an annual participation fee for participation in the National Poultry Improvement Plan, not to exceed $50, a certification fee for persons performing testing and diagnostic services, and then a fee not to exceed $100 for testing per visit to each location participating in the plan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Heather, any fiscal note?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have received a fiscal note that we did not have at the time of the hearing. The Department of Agriculture indicates the enactment of the bill would increase expenditures by $35,500 in fiscal year 2026 and $40,500 in fiscal year 2027 from agency fee funds for field veterinarian routine surveillance salaries, agency administration staff, and antigen supplies. Currently, these services are provided at no charge, and the agency estimates the bill would generate revenues totaling $11,250 per year for registrations for certified testers and $7,000 per year for on-site testing for participants.
Thank you. Okay. Representative Droege?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this participation required or voluntary?
We do have Dr. Smith here with us as well. Or Kelsey, would somebody want to answer that question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if I'm correct, the question is whether or not this was a voluntary or a mandatory program. Is that correct? So the National Poultry Improvement Program is a voluntary program, but it is, if someone is wanting to move birds across state lines, they are required to participate in that program in order to safely move them across state lines. So they can choose to participate in it unless they want to, then it's required at the federal level.
Representative Droege?
Thank you. That answers my question.
Okay. Other questions on the bill? Seeing none, Representative Neely?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we pass SB 89, favorable for passage.
It has been moved, seconded by Mosier. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Post same sign. Senate Bill 89 is passed out favorably. Thank you. Who wants to carry this one? Representative Gardner. Okay, thank you. All right. So there's those. I know, Mr. Henning, don't worry if people get up to leave. Well, we want to do that, and we know they've got some other meetings, but so don't feel bad. Up next, we have a presentation on PFAS. We know them as those forever chemicals. At least that's a simple way to do that. So, Leo Henning is the director for the Division of Environment at the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. Welcome back to committee, and we are, folks. He will go about 15, 20 minutes, and we'll take questions. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers and committee members. And for the committee members that were in the Water Committee that has already heard this presentation, I will not be offended if you get up and leave, because I think I made you somewhat sad when I gave you this discussion the last time. So, all right, so I just wanted to provide a short little informational presentation regarding PFAS. This is informational. You may have many questions about PFAS and where we're going with them. And don't be surprised if I have to answer your question for right now is I don't know, because this is a new thing for our state. So, does this work? All right, we're working. So first of all, PFAS. It's a catch-all name for numerous type of chemicals, but they are man-made chemicals. They are chains of carbon that have fluorine atoms hooked to them. And those fluorine atoms and that carbon bond is a very, very strong bond. And therefore, it is hard for these chemicals to naturally degrade. They just want to stay that way, no matter what the temperature, pressure is. They want to stay together, and so they don't naturally just break down in the environment. And there are literally thousands of PFAS chemicals that man has made and is using in our industry. So because they don't break down, you will find them very persistent in the environment. So why did we use these PFAS chemicals? Well, they were good because they repel oils and greases, and because of their temperature, they were used to put out fires. AFFF is what the typical terminology is. And this is that firefighting foam that they would spray on gasoline spills or aircraft wrecks. It actually smothers the fire out, but it does take that high heat. And some of the chemicals that we've used that you know that are in your house are probably things like Scotch Guard and Stainmaster. You've sprayed your carpeting with it, you've sprayed your furniture with it, and it does repel all the stains and spills that might occur. The other common place that you'll see it is on Teflon pans. Teflon is a PFAS chemical. That's why you see now a push to move away from Teflon skillets and go more to the ceramics coated stuff. And then, like I was talking about, the AFFF was the firefighting foam. So some of the things that you'll see listed there are, they were coatings on your hamburger wrappers, so that when you got a hamburger and it might be a little greasy, it didn't soak up the paper. Well, it's because it was treated with PFAS. And popcorn bags, where you put your popcorn in the microwave and you put it in there and it pops at a really high temperature really fast. That bag didn't deteriorate because there was PFAS on the inside of that to handle that. But it's in a lot of our products: cosmetics, upholstery, carpeting. They used to put it on children's clothes as a fire retardant. So we have used this chemical, and it was a great chemical for years and years. So recently, as we as humans get smarter and smarter, we have found out that PFAS as a group is not really good for us. And you can see the list of the ill effects of PFAS. And the one I would bring to your attention is the one at the bottom, where there is a fairly strong correlation between kidney cancer and PFAS is listed as a possible carcinogenic. But when you see the cleanup standards, that correlation must be very good, because they have set the cleanup standards for this at a very, very low threshold. So let's talk about PFAS in the environment a little bit, just so that we can kind of understand where it is in the environment. Our industries have used PFAS chemicals for years and years. They have had emissions where it went out the stacks of the facilities, and it's carried by the air and deposited on the soil. They have discharged it to the sanitary sewer. That sanitary sewer transmitted it to the wastewater treatment plants. The wastewater treatment plants treated the water, never thinking about PFAS. They were treating it for other things. And that wastewater then is discharged to the streams. And then the biosolids out of those wastewater treatment plants were applied to farm fields as a fertilizer. Also, just applying this on like a spill for a fire, that foam was put on, it was never taken back off. So whatever was left there on that soil could percolate down into the groundwater. Also, your homes. Everyone that used these chemicals in their homes threw it in the trash. That trash goes to a landfill. That landfill has now a huge collection of PFAS chemicals in it. Also, if you have a septic tank, believe it or not, you have PFAS in you. Every one of us does. And we do. That does end up into your septic tanks if you're on a septic system, which then leaches into the groundwater. So there are just so many routes, or routes, depending on where you're from, for this chemical to move around through the environment. And that's what I just wanted to bring out on this illustration is it's almost a circular pattern, but ultimately the end place is landfills, water, and soil. So EPA has been busy. They are starting to promulgate standards for drinking water for these chemicals. They've also now listed it as a hazardous substance in April of '24. So the reason that KDHE probably, we've been waiting a little bit on this whole regulatory effort is because there were no standards out. Without federal standards, KDHE wants to always use the federal standards as our limit on what we enforce. We don't want to get ahead of EPA too far, but the EPA is catching up with their rulemaking. So we have those already promulgated. We expect that in the next year we'll see cleanup standards for water quality, for wastewater effluents, biosolids, and we expect it to be listed as a hazardous waste in RCRA. We expect that there's going to be some requirements at our Subtitle D landfills to start testing for PFAS. And we expect in the next few years, not right away, but it will also be a part of the Clean Air Act chemicals, and we will start having to measure it, what is being emitted into the air as emissions from facilities. So right now, for drinking water, there are 6 of the thousands of PFAS chemicals that now have drinking water standards. Those standards are now been set at 4 to 10 parts per trillion. Yes, trillion. This is something we couldn't have even measured 10 years ago. So now these are very, very low numbers, which that ties into, I believe, the toxicity that EPA is promulgating. So drinking water systems are now required to start monitoring their PFAS, and any facility or system that is not meeting those drinking water standards has to be in compliance by April of '29. So EPA has been out and started sampling some of the municipality drinking water systems in the state. They sampled 40 of them. Out of the 40, they did find 2 cities in which PFAS is above the drinking water standards. And so we will start working with those 2 cities to make sure that they can be in compliance by '29. More facilities will start being tested, and I imagine we'll find more as we do more testing. So on the other end of the plumbing, that was the drinking water side. Here's the wastewater side. Industries will start being required to look at what they're discharging to the wastewater that goes to the wastewater treatment plants, and they may have to put on treatment to reduce the amount of PFAS going to the wastewater treatment plants. Everyone's going to start monitoring their discharges to see what's in them. Surface water quality standards will be hitting this year, we expect. And the bottom bullet of that is the thing that is kind of the wild card in all this, which is we believe that EPA may come out with a human health criteria that could be in the parts per quadrillion, which means that all the other standards may get lowered as this, if this actually goes through. And this is something that we're truly watching, because this is a big thing if this goes through. So on the wastewater side, we feel like it's manageable right now, unless that parts per quadrillion for human impacts goes through. Wastewater effluent will be in the parts per trillion. Wastewater treatment plants will probably have to increase their treatment for PFAS to meet those standards. And the only PFAS we have found in lakes so far is in Clinton Lake, and that's the bottom bullet there. So KDHE has been out sampling the streams just to kind of get an idea of where we are. It was voluntary on our part. There was no requirement to do it, but we kind of wanted to know what's it like in Kansas. So here's a map of Kansas where we have taken stream samples. And the thing I want to point out is non-detect are blank circles. And there are very few blank circles on that map. So we are finding it at low levels around the state. Very rural areas, very urban areas, we are finding it in many places. There are a couple red spots on there, and I just want to bring your attention to those. Those are the ones that we will start looking at to see why is these red dots here. Same with lakes and wetlands. These are the lakes and wetlands that we've tested. And again, you only see one red dot on there, and that will be the area that we will start looking at to say, what is causing this? But you only see, I believe, one or two dots up there that are not colored. So again, it is at low levels around our state. Fish tissues, we've captured fish, we've sampled the fish tissue, the meat slabs, not the whole body, but just what you would eat. And you can see that there's a couple red spots up there again. And those are the ones that we will investigate further to see why are the fish in this area more contaminated than the others. Let's talk about biosolids a little bit. Biosolids is the solids that come out of your wastewater treatment plants. If you look at the diagram on the right side there, you'll see how much is coming into the wastewater treatment plant is the big bar on the left side, and then the smaller bar on the right side is what is being discharged into the stream. So that delta, that difference between the high bar and the little bar, is what's being concentrated into the biosolids. And it's those biosolids that are hauled off and usually applied to farm fields. Some of the concerns that we have with PFAS right now, some of our complications is one is that human health number. If that comes out in the parts per quadrillion, we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do with that, because that's going to drive a lot of standards very low. Our KHEL, a lab that does the analytical tests for the municipalities for their drinking water. We've stand the testing method up to do that. So the cities can still send their water samples to KDHE's lab, and we can test for drinking water per method 533. What the lab cannot do yet is test everything that's not water. Fish tissues, soils, I shouldn't say groundwater, we can probably do groundwater, but all those other media things that is not drinking water, we would have to stand up that method to do that testing, and that's an expensive method to stand up, and we're looking at about a $600,000 investment just to buy the equipment and about $150,000 a year to run it. So that is something that's on the need side that we're going to have to look at when we start getting into those type of samples. Leachate from the landfills. Landfills are going to have to treat their water that goes to the sanitary wastewater treatment plants. The sanitary landfills are going to have to treat the leachate that goes to the wastewater treatment plants. That can become expensive for those landfills. There's only two options for them really, is have the water go to the wastewater treatment plant or put it into a deep well down in the Arbuckle to get rid of it in that direction. So landfills is going to have to do some investments to deal with their leachate. And in biosolids that are being applied to farmers' fields, we will have to look at what we're going to do with that. Are we going to continue to allow that in the future? Is that a good idea? These are all questions that we're going to have to figure out. Should we be testing the biosolids to see how much is in it before we apply it to fields? I mean, there's a lot of things that we're going to have to start working out on the biosolid disposal. The other alternative, though, is haul it all to a landfill. That may not be the best answer either. So there's a lot of discussion that needs to occur around that. I think I skipped one. I'm sorry, yep. So PFOA and PFOS is now a hazardous substance. So since that is true, we are going to have to figure out what we do with contaminated sites. We have contaminated sites all over the state. KDHE has always monitored those sites for everything but PFOS. PFOS wasn't on the radar. We might have thought that we had the site cleaned up. We've had landfills that we've closed saying that they were clean because we never sampled for PFOS. We are going to have to now find out, is there PFOS there? If they're operating, is there PFOS getting away from the monitoring wells that are monitoring the groundwater? Because we've never sampled for PFOS before. We might have large plumes leaving a facility that we have no idea where it's going and who it's impacting. So opening up the contaminated sites portion of this could be an eye-opening experience also. Where we thought we were being protective, we may not have been. And it's not anyone's fault. This wasn't even on the radar. But the fact is that with this becoming a hazardous substance now, we are going to be required to make sure we are protecting human health. Because the last thing we want is to be impacting human health. And I kind of touched on this on the contaminated site. So one of the first things we have to do is update our Kansas risk manual, which says what is clean in Kansas. People in industry across the state use that to determine what's the level that I have to clean up to say that I can get closure on my contaminated site. As we add these PFOS chemicals to that risk manual, it's going to spur a lot of questions about have we been, can it be closed? One of the things that we have not done, and we maybe need to consider it, is to do a background study in urban areas to see what the PFOS contamination levels are in residential soils. If we've been emitting this into the air for 50 years. Those chemicals have probably settled. What's those concentrations in those yards? And then are those safe or not? I've already talked about the contaminated sites. The sites are very concerning to KDHE. All sites are important, but we have a lot of orphan sites where the state is the lead on those because the responsible party's gone. As we start looking at those sites, if we find something, it's going to be very expensive for the state to deal with it. And so the cost to deal with the contaminated site part of this is going to be difficult to estimate right now because we've not really even done the sampling. So what we're doing to help is we're helping the utilities do their PFAS sampling to get an idea of whether they have PFAS in their drinking water or not. We will be required to adopt the federal standards for PFAS for drinking water. And like I said, as we went through those maps, our next step is to start looking at those red spots on those maps and trying to figure out why are they there. I think we have a pretty good idea why some of them are there, but we have not proved it, so we need to start doing some testing and figure out why they're there. So it's just a brief update on the PFAS issue. It is going to be a 10, 20, 30-year endeavor to get through all this. But I wanted you to hear about it because you may start hearing more and more about this as time goes by. So with that, I'll take any questions you may have, or I can sit down if you want me to.
Hey, Leo. Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm sure nobody has any questions, so we'll stack them up. First, Representative Roth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation today. It's pretty interesting. So, like on the streams or rivers or even the small lakes and stuff, does this PFAS have a possibility of affecting chickens and cows and sheeps and goats and stuff like that, animals like that?
If you are watering out of the stream and they're drinking that water, then yes.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking of. I've seen, a lot of cattle that they're on a large field, but it does have a small stream going through it, And so if that would, but we don't know what the impact to animals from PFAS would be.
We do.
Okay.
We do know. Different animals are different, but the concern is that the PFAS can get into the meat of the animal. That meat then, if it's going to a store, could have PFAS in it. I'm not trying to raise red flags and say we got an issue, but on the other hand, there are groups that go into grocery stores, pull the meat off of the racks, and sample it to see if there's PFAS in it.
Well, I saw a red dot on the Walnut River just south of the El Dorado Lake, so that's my question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for your answer.
Sure, I think that's where that big dot was. So, Representative Schlangenstein.
You talked about what would happen if the parts per quadrillion measure was introduced. I want to try to understand this, since I assume we're not talking about just some random measure. I assume that there's some evidence to suggest that even a few parts per quadrillion is so toxic that one needs to be concerned about it at the quadrillion rather than the trillion level. Is that how I'm understanding what you're saying?
What I would maybe correct just a little bit in there is a lifetime exposure at a low level could increase the possibility of cancer.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your answer.
Representative Droege.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. I had kind of a couple questions. You had mentioned treatment mitigation for like landfills and water treatment plants. What mitigation is there?
So the most common one right now is activated carbon or resin, where the water goes into the activated carbon. The carbon will pull the contaminant out of the water, and then the water flows on through. That's the most popular ones right now. There's some new technology coming out, especially for landfill leachate, because landfill leachate has got lots of stuff in it, right? And so it's called foamation. And they take a cylinder of water, they bubble air through it. The PFAS will actually go to the surface as a foam, like a soap in your dish soap. And then they suck that foam off the top, and then they can treat just the foam. They can destroy it. But it's out there. It's somewhat proven, but that's probably the direction that we see it going, because there's possibilities there.
Okay, the other part of my question was like incineration. I don't mean open burning, but in a closed.
Yeah, so that is one way of destroying the PFAS chemical. Once you get it concentrated from that foam, and you get that maybe 1 million gallons of water, and you get the PFAS out of that, it equals maybe a tablespoon. I'm just using an example. I don't know, I haven't. But maybe you get that down to a tablespoon of PFAS. That PFAS is either incinerated at very high temperatures, or they have a chemical way of destroying it. They call it superoxidation. But that's how they actually can demineralize or destroy the PFAS, because that bond, that fluorine-carbon bond, is incredibly strong.
Representative Weigel. Yes, Weigel, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So did I hear correctly that the EPA final rule that you mentioned, that's in progress? Is that right?
It depends which rule you're talking about. Drinking water for 6 chemicals is done,
Okay.
but they got many more to do. The hazardous substance listing, that's done. But all the other ones for streams and biosolids and leachate and all that, those are to come in the next year or so.
Do you have thoughts or concerns about whether those will be finalized? I think a lot of regulations have been stopped.
Well, they were being fast-tracked in the previous administration. I cannot speak to this administration. I believe that the train is left on PFAS and that they will continue working on them. There's too much work has been done in too many states for it not to happen. So I do believe that additional federal requirements for the different media will be happening in the next year or two.
Representative Minix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just an observation. Whoever set up the seating chart here, for you kids on the other side, I see 6 old guys over here that probably drank out of a garden hose before DuPont made Teflon. So from one of them, my suggestion to you is live your lives, enjoy. Don't worry too much about this for a little bit until we get more answers. Fair enough, guys?
Representative Mosley.
First, thank you for your presentation, and I feel like my question was somewhat answered by Representative Minix, but I noticed one of the lakes that I enjoy paddling on and kayaking on is on that list. I am not guzzling water from a lake. I have not had a glass of water from tap that has not been filtered in quite some time. Is there anything that would be good? Don't laugh at me. Look at you. We'll see if we knew. But is there anything that could be concerning about like skin contact on that, or is it just like if you're ingesting it at large quantities? Like, are there things that you should be looking for if you're like in there and you fall off your paddle board or something like that?
Okay.
You can give me an offline answer if you don't want to be alarmist. We could talk privately also.
I will give you an example, and it depends on how much risk you feel like you're comfortable taking. And I will use an example that we had out in southwest Kansas, where we had uranium in groundwater that people were drinking. And the risk was, the response from those people when they found out that they were drinking the uranium ranged from, I don't care, I've been drinking it for 50 years, and it hasn't killed me yet, to another one that's, and the drinking water standard's 30, so anything below standard is considered safe, to someone that had 1 to 2 parts per million in their, or parts per billion in their water, and their comment was, I don't care what the standard is. I don't want any uranium in me. So it's not a direct answer for you. There is an absorption portion of PFAS through the skin. It's very low, but it really depends on what your risk tolerance is.
Considering that I've eaten street vendor food overseas, I feel like I am safe.
Yeah.
All right, and I know Representative Page, you need to take off pretty quick, so go ahead.
Okay. You gave April 29th. Is that April 29th this year?
No.
You gave it.
Of 2029.
Oh, I thought
I'm sorry, if I misspoke, it's 2029.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, we got 5 years.
Okay, and then my second
All right.
question, and you may not answer it, but what were the 2 cities?
I prefer not to talk about that in a public setting. They are working on their issues. I don't want to put special light on those 2 cities right now, if you don't mind. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Representative Blex, then please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just seen on the news night before last that the current administration is looking at challenging the PFAS specifications. Have you got anything up to date of seeing that as far as from what EPA is proposing?
I would just say.
But I've seen that on fake news, so I'm not sure.
Right, and I would just say that right now EPA is like a black hole. We aren't seeing much of anything out of PFAS right now as they are adapting to the new administration. I know that that's not an answer, but we can't hardly get much out of EPA right now.
And one more follow-up for the ladies across, worrying about a lot of things, and there's a lot of things to worry about. But chlorinated hydrocarbons is from years and years of using chlorine, which is a very long persisting timeline. And the areas around the Ark River in Wichita use a lot of chlorine for termite treatment in that sand. And so Wildlife and Parks Fish and Game, they had through KDHE work, they had some fish advisory warnings. And certain fish are bottom feeders. They're subject to more of that intake of that chemical. But having said all that, and it sounds scary, and it can be, certainly for a certain class of people, you know, a nursing mother, a pregnant woman. But when you start looking at the standards, that you would have to eat fish probably about 7 times or 8 a week, and that standard is for usually a 150-pound person. So it's a lot of eating fish, but it is wise that you alert the public, let them make the call, let them make the choice. Do I like catfish or do I like crappie, you know, type thing. So they're out there. There's a lot of them. I manage the mine land strip pits in southeast Kansas, and they're huge and full of everything that was dumped into those. So there's a lot of fish advisories that it hadn't stopped people from fishing. They realize they probably run the risk. I've drank it for 40 years and I'm still alive type thing. But it's scary, but maybe not as scary as we think. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Representative Schlingensieben.
Thank you, Representative Blex. My plan for retirement was to have a little dock on a strip pit and a little cabin and sit there and fish for the rest of my life. I'm going to have to rethink that one. But in all seriousness, what is like the main form of absorption, just out of curiosity? Let's just assume that this is toxic just for the heck of it. I mean, if you have a water filter with charcoal in it, you're not going to have much problem from drinking water. So I imagine that's probably the main source, and everything else kind of falls off from there. Am I wrong about that?
I would say you're correct. That drinking water with PFAS in it is the most concerning part of it. Can you pick it up other places? You bet. Sure. When you eat your hamburger that's been wrapped in PFAS. Yep, probably took some in.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions or comments for Leo? Yeah, Representative White.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see you're drinking bottled water. What's the parts per billion of PFAS in that, you suppose?
Wow, that's good. I've never sampled bottled water for PFAS.
Right from the store.
It just depends on the source of that water, but I would hope, I'll say hope, that whoever's selling that water has sampled it.
Well, I've heard, the cheaper the plastic.
For microplastics.
That's about as cheap as plastic. I don't know if that's a correct terminology, but the crinkly kind is.
No, microplastics is another subject that we can talk about even later.
Sure. One more. What is this method 1633 that you had in your presentation?
That's an EPA standard for testing. 533 is for drinking water. 1633 is for everything else, whether it's blood, whether it's sediment, soils. That is the method that you use to extract the PFAS out of whatever media you have and then run it to a standard.
One more. What is this? You said the equipment for testing parts per billion. How many places in the state of Kansas are able to do that?
To sample what we need to do PFAS, right now there's 2. K-State and us have the ability to do it, in academic versus state agency. There are private labs out there that are doing it. What we have found is they're very expensive, and getting results back from them could be 6 months to 8 months later.
And what would the cost be of parts per quadrillion equipment?
To be honest, I don't even think we can get to that. But the problem is if you set that standard for human health, then you start back calculating all these other exposures where they might say, 40 parts per trillion is fine for wading water, water that you wade in. If we set that at that lower level, we might have to then back calculate what that real wading number is going to be, and it would probably be lower. So it's just, we are hoping that that never happens. We do not want to see that to happen because we can't even measure to parts per quadrillion.
I just have a feeling once we start measuring to that degree, we're all toast.
I personally would tend to agree with that. That's not a KDHE comment. That's a Leo Henning comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Representative Droege?
I'm just going to make a comment. In Chem Analysis, I remember they talked about 5 parts per million was a shot glass of vermouth in a tank car of gin.
Yeah. No, we are talking about very low concentrations.
Other questions or comments? You say
it's a shot glass of vermouth in a tank car of gin.
Yeah. Sounds like somebody's thirsty. Okay. All right. And basically, from our standpoint, this being the Agriculture Committee, we look at PFAS, it's not necessarily focusing in on agriculture, all those other things you mentioned. And we do have a new administrator in EPA Region 7, but we all have heard kind of the same things, that the new administrator is a little bit different than the old one in D.C., different president, different ideas on things. But I think you're right on, Leo. Some of these, the clean water thing that was basically passed through. I mean, it was, some of those things happen and they're not partisan. Some of the other things, though, I think would be. And Representative Droege?
Mr. Chairman, did you hear the discussion about the dairy herd in New Mexico? You mentioned it didn't seem to have as much to do with ag. Did you hear that?
Yes, okay. That it was an Air Force or an old.
If you want me to
go ahead, explain that.
So there was a dairy that was using groundwater to feed their cattle, and it was a dairy farm. I believe it was a 1,500 head setup. They fed, they used the groundwater to water their cattle. That was right next to an Air Force base. The AFFF at the Air Force Base to train, to put out fires, made it down into the groundwater, migrated underneath into this area where the wells were picking it up, and the cattle became contaminated with PFAS. What happened then was when they sampled the milk was very high in PFAS, and so therefore they couldn't sell their milk. And a dairy that can't sell their milk won't be around for very long. They couldn't even sell the cattle because they were listed as having PFAS in them. So that farmer or rancher went out of business. They euthanized the cattle. They were all buried there on that facility because if you're a milk buyer, when you get the choice of buying milk with PFAS in it or without, they will not buy the milk with the PFAS in it. So they will buy, so that it ended his market, and so it put him out of business.
Okay, Representative Seibert?
Thank you. I heard that too. Could they not just use the cattle for breeding stock? Would that go into the baby calves if they're trying to continue the herd?
It probably would phase out, but I can't really answer that question, Representative. But for Kansas, probably our biggest concern is where we applied the biosolids on the fields. And what are those fields being used for? Is the groundwater being used for drinking water? And so those are the areas that probably for an agricultural committee, that will be a concern that we will have to look at sometime.
So, I mean, do you think as we look at moving forward, is this something that, you know, we have the College of Agriculture, we have the commodity groups, should we have you make an annual report to kind of what we're, I'm just saying, yeah, it was almost like you were volunteering yourself to come back and give us the update. But I guess maybe explain, and I don't want to drag this thing out any longer, but explain maybe situation like this, the relationship that KDHE and the Department of Ag have with EPA in dealing this. Who's kind of the lead, you know, and what, you know, because we love to throw the EPA under the bus, and probably rightly so for some things, but maybe explain that process as these things come up. Are you doing the dirty work for EPA, if you will, when it comes to that? Just maybe explain it if you can, what you know right now.
So, yes, most of these programs, KDHE is the lead on. So we wait for the federal standards to hit. We then implement those federal standards. So you call it dirty work. It is just what the federal standards are that we all have to comply with. So yes, we've had discussions with Department of Ag, Commerce, about this whole subject and where it's going and what's going to happen. And we will continue having those interagency discussions. These laws are just now becoming law. These standards are just now becoming out. So we are going to probably ramp up those interagency discussions on, so where's this going, who's doing what, but yes, that interstate discussion is occurring.
All right, very good. Anything else for Leo? Okay, I think we've had enough of you. No, we've had enough. Thank you.
I don't blame you.
Very good. Well, there's something to think about tonight when you get that glass of water. I drank out of a hose. They said that was part of my challenge I had. So I quit growing. I kept getting taller. So if that was anything to do with it or not. All right. Yeah. Representative Seibert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I ask Leo, Mr. Henning, a quick question? You know, a lot of people ask me, you know, we talk about water, we talk about all the things, and like styrofoam cups manufacturing in these bottles, they have chemicals that they put on the things when they make the bottles. does that transfer into the water, or do they have a cleaning process? I don't know how to answer my constituents with those questions, to be honest. So has anything ever been done on that?
You mean just testing the bottle to see
Well,
if
you know,
there's
when
any?
they make this bottle,
Yeah,
there's things they put on there so everything don't stick, you know, just like you put on, you know, we talk about Teflon and.
right. I'm not the right person to ask for that. I'm sorry. I wish I could give you a definitive
I think that's
answer.
the
but-
health side of KDHE rather than the E
but
side.
I've got to believe that anything that you consume is regulated by the federal regulators. And so I'm sure there's standards out there.
Well, if that was the case, we wouldn't have to worry about this.
Well, it goes back to the question about, is this water that I just drank have PFAS in it? And I would say, I very well hope so.
No.
I'm just curious.
That's not in there.
Thank you.
All
Didn't
right.
mean to put you on the spot, just be
Yeah,
curious.
I just don't have the answer.
Sure. Okay. Now, watch your calendar. Oh, we have till the 17th, right? We have a whole other week we can meet?
The 17th is Monday.
To get it done this week, really, by the schedule. If it's anything that might be different and would need to go to conference, we need to be done this week.
Yeah. Hey, what is today? What is today, Brooke? Tuesday? I know. Oh, what is the 11th?
15th is St. Patty.
We don't know.
17th is Monday, is St. Patty.
Okay. Right. What we will do, we will meet tomorrow, right? We meet tomorrow? We don't have a meet, what do we have? Oh, that's right. We're going to talk the soy processing plant. Excuse me. Yes, the processing plant at Cherryvale will be, he will he will talk about what's going on there and the impact for all that. We will watch your email. We will probably meet Monday. We have a bill. We'll do a quick hearing and we'll do for emergency final action. It's the one dealing with the ducks or the geese or something, ducks. It's an upland bird bill that came from Will Carpenter and something like that. Senate, because we were waiting for the Senate to do something. Evidently they did finally. I mean, on this bill anyway. So I got to talk, we talked about that possibly. So probably if we get that out there, since today's Tuesday, we can get it out and then we'll plan on doing it. Is that all right, Kyle? And we'll just let them know. We'll just have, if we work it the same day we hear it, because that's all we have left, right? We've cleaned everything up we have right now. And so we have nothing, except if we do this one, because I think we can push it so because the Senate, I don't think made any changes. It's a waterfowl bill. Who knows anything about it?
Oh, is that the one limiting out-of-state hunters? Yeah, restricting out-of-state hunters to
Mike?
hunt on public areas only on a Sunday, Monday, and a Tuesday, because a lot of surrounding states are passing similar laws, so it's bringing a pile
Okay.
of hunters, out-of-state hunters to our public areas. It won't apply to private ponds, rivers, or anything. It'll just be like Corps of Engineers areas, wildlife and parks, public areas where we get a lot of pressure. And that gives the residents the opportunity to have Saturday without competition for residents. Now, we wouldn't need this bill because out-of-state waterfowl hunting has increased over 40% in the last 4 years. So it's been huge, and they're coming to Kansas.
Okay.
We're seeing a lot of this competition on public areas.
So we will plan on hearing that and planning on doing emergency final action. So read the bill if you think there's an amendment you want to do. If not, we will just like shoot it.
It's really needed. It wasn't needed 5 years ago.
Okay.
But it's probably
Okay.
needed now because what the impact other states are doing.
So that will be our Monday meeting, but we will meet tomorrow and learn more about the soy crush plant at Cherryvale. Anything else to go to the cause? We are adjourned.